what I want to do actually in this session is kind of try to wrap up, what is the focus, well, at least attempt to try and find some focus and theme for enterprise communication. So I kind of bring this diverse panel, from different parts of the ecosystem, trying to help us navigate, what is the future of enterprise communication. I saw some theme that kind of transpired: trust, identity, and I think optimization, in kind of a big bucket. So that's pretty much, and I think I'm going to let, our leaders here kind of like free flow their thoughts around what they're thinking, where they're coming from in the next 20 minutes or so, and kind of share their perspective. And maybe we'll continue this over cocktail afterward as well. So I think maybe I'll kick off with maybe a question to Mary. I mean, when we kind of prepping this session, we talk about, we talk about the customer engagement and, channels. What is the most effective channel for customer engagement? AI has introduced a factor, a complication, maybe a way to make this decision making easier or even more difficult. How do you navigate this, tech stacks of choices that enterprise have today?
Yeah, it's totally confusing.
What are your thoughts around that? Yeah.
Any enterprise CMO person responsible for marketing that's got to also potentially have some sort of customer engagement, they are absolutely challenged understanding, and I'm only talking about the very tall, very, very tip at the top of that group that that has any sophistication on this at all. Not the SMBs we were just talking about, but that group that's very much at the very top of that pyramid. They have so much scrutiny on every dollar that they're spending. Marketing expense is going down in both B2B and B2C year over year, and has been for the last easily 3 to 4 years. Certainly since COVID, which challenged every engagement metric that you could possibly have. And so with the advent now of AI being literally thrown into every single MarTech stack tool that you have as someone responsible for touching a consumer, I think everything we've talked about today just adds more fuel to the fire of what the CSPs have got to do, which is constantly communicate and educate. What are the options? What's going to be the best way that you can actually reach that consumer in a way through the channel that they want, all the way back to what Ladima talked about this morning, right? What's that channel that they want to be communicated with? What's going to have the most appropriate interaction and response from them? But so much of this is cutting through that wheat from the chaff, right? We've got to make this easier for them. If nothing else, we've got to be able to simplify. Look, here are a handful of things that you can be doing. We need to make sure that as you're communicating out, are you being a part of the community that's being vetted? Are you making sure that you have the opt-in capability from the consumer? It's all of those things, because the confusion is just drastic. It's just brutal. And AI just gets thrown into to everything. So and you hear AI, and if you're responsible for marketing, all you think is, oh, good. It's going to go up by another 20%. Whatever the hell I got to do, it's going to go up by another 20% at least, right? So it's awful. Yep. It's brutal.
So I guess let's just kind of, the next question I have is for Martin in terms of AI agents and customer communication and challenges, your clients are facing. How are you addressing that, and what are your thoughts around that topic?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously ever evolving. I think the biggest thing to kind of center around is most of our customers are within kind of CRM space. So there's a lot of pressure for their customers to be able to actually launch these AI agents to be able to help with either support or marketing or anything else. But I think the biggest hesitation is around letting some sort of ungoverned wild person loose to be able to be communicated with, because there is a lot of content out there for how you can trick AI to say all kinds of things. And as we all know, there's no better way to get blocked than to have somebody who's uneducated about messaging sending a message. So if you are in any space, it really just heightens the considerations and risks that you're taking on. So yeah, that is certainly a big hesitation that is holding them back from testing it out. So yeah, whatever we can do to try and help them get more guidelines or help to be able to at least keep them in check, I think it's going to be a big portion of getting it rolled out.
Yep. So, I mean, I want to move a bit to a trust topic. Luisa, when we were prepping this, you mentioned about that you were seeing a lot of AI generated traffic across your platform coming in, especially, of course, not just in the US, but also Latin America, where you serve your customers. So I guess when it comes to trust and AI traffic and brands, what are the challenges? You know, what are you seeing the challenges around that?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and it's something that it's hitting the ecosystem completely. You know, I think that, of course, in the US we don't see it as much because it's a highly regulated market. It's not inflated in terms of pricing, so it's sort of trust issues that brands might have here in the US is completely different. Now, in other markets, in Latin America and in other markets around the globe, we're seeing a loss in trust completely by the big brands because we have two effects, right? First, we have the exclusivities and the rising prices, you know, markets that are above the 30 cents in certain countries. And then all this artificially generated traffic. So the cost for these brands for messaging has increased exponentially. So they're trying, you know, to move away from SMS. They don't trust this channel anymore. And now, you know, before it was only hit towards the brands, right? Brands were the ones that had to pay for non-real messages at the end of the day. What's happening right now is that this is going down the stream because brands are saying, you know what, I'm not going to pay for this anymore. So this is raising disputes, and the entire ecosystem is being hit with this. So this is something that we've seen for the past 2 years, brands being affected, and now I would say even today, I was in an earlier meeting with the i3 Forum where they explained, where we were discussing how are we going to deal with this situation, you know, as aggregators, as operators, how are we going to deal with all this situation? And there's not a lot of clarity on what's going to happen there, right? So brands are saying, you know what, I'm going to move away from this. I'm going to use other channels. I'm going to start using WhatsApp, where the operators are not going to get any, you know, revenues out of it. So it's growing a lot outside of the US. It's a big issue, and I think it's hitting the ecosystem, the messaging, A2P messaging ecosystem very aggressively.
Okay. John, I want to talk about verification because I know you're helping brands verify and and making sure that they are who they are, and you have the process around that. We talk about the friction to deter the fraudsters, but also, but not so much to drive legitimate businesses to unregulated channels. How do we achieve this balance between verification, or too much or too less, versus yeah.
Thanks. Hello? Thank you. That's a great question, actually. Balance is really the key, quite honestly. You want to do enough to dissuade some of the bad actors, but you also want to have an open, easy process for the good actors to get in. And so doing, one of the things is, what kinds of information do you need to collect from the brand that's coming in? And you need to do two things. You need to verify that they legally exist in the country that they're from and that they're in a good standing, and you need to verify that they are in fact who they say they are. And so that requires certain data fields to be submitted. Some of the challenges we've had is that historically these are not data fields that large companies have been collecting on their brands, and so they've got to kind of go back out, try to reach out to the brands and get this information. But from a balance perspective, we're minimizing the number of data fields that we're asking for to very specific things to do those two objectives. And once we verify that we've got a real company that legally exists and they are who they say they are, then we can go to 60 or 80 data sources and do a behavioral history on the company to see if there's anything in there that would indicate any kind of fraud. The other thing that we're doing is trying to make that as fast as possible. So we've done 3.6 million transactions through our platform of brands coming in the last 3 years. We've done as many as 43,000 in a day successfully. And the idea is to make the onboarding process as fast as we possibly can. And in order to do that, the behavioral analysis needs to be enough to protect the market, but not too much. And it can't be less than what's needed. So balance becomes very, very critical in terms of how deep are we going to go on this company, depending on the risk to the channel. Because if you go too deep, you're wasting money, you're wasting time, and it just doesn't add value, because on the flip side, there are other channels. And if you do too much work on the verification, it costs more money, which drives people to other channels. So balance is really the key word. You said it, I agree. And balance has a number of different dimensions with which we operate in to try to make these channels work.
Okay, thanks. And I'm moving from theme to theme because I like to cover as much as possible and kind of throw it out there and open up the conversation. But Martin, you mentioned when we were prepping this about the challenge that you have, like multiple registration, multiple times with different vendors. I mean, that's something that you feel that the industry needs to do better in terms of helping the enterprise, simplifying, maybe register. What is your, I guess, vision or goal? If you can have a register one across the ecosystem, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I guess it goes a little bit into kind of the solutioning, but I guess to just kind of go back to the problem for that. So this is something that we're hearing from both the providers, so I'm thinking now the CPaaS companies, as well as the actual ISVs and the software companies, again, think CRMs, where they might have 5,000 brands under them. And whenever they're going, and it's going great, that's wonderful. But they're all growing, and we all know how the industry goes. Eventually they're going to want to use additional vendors or even switch vendors. And today, all the new regulations that's in place to protect the industry, to protect the traffic, has now left a lot of them feeling that they're kind of shackled, because the switching cost now is so tremendous. The changes in compliance that has come out since, let's say, they were registered 2 years ago, deems their previous vetting almost irrelevant. And that then leaves them with having to pay all the burden of the actual manual effort to just re-vet the websites even, and check that everything is still above bar. So right now, for kind of what is the solution for this, I mean, that's obviously aspirational, but we see it for kind of obviously with 10DLC, with TFN, with shortcode. It all requires the business at the end, the brand, to be verified. And I think if there was a way for that to be carried by the brand, and for that to be registered, so that it's something that the brand can give an ID to the software providers, would be probably the easiest way. Because ultimately, they're the ones that have to pay for and also do the additional work to increase their brand score. At any point there?
You want to add something,
Oh, yeah.
Mary?
I
can see that.
I want to jump in. John and I are fighting for who was going to say something first. Well, that's great. I think identity is really at the core of this. And Jack Philbin and I are supposed to do a wrap-up here at the end of this. I'm just going to steal a little thunder from that. I just got to make this one point. In this conversation throughout today, we have the verification process for RCS. We have the verification process that was referred to by the gentleman from TransUnion and FO and TNS, right? So that's another one. That's for branded calling. There is also the branded calling ID initiative that is being put forward by CTIA. There is the branding activity that's occurring inside of TCR for the campaign registry. I'm sure there's more. I'm sure I'm missing some. But the reality here is that that's just the United States. So the fatigue associated with, oh my God, I got to tell somebody else what my friggin' EIN is, and my, give you my privacy policy and my firstborn child and a quart of blood. It's one of these things of where and how are we making it easier for the enterprise to be recognized across all of these channels? Go.
And now, thank you very much. So we are involved in RBM in the U.S. And working with the different carriers, and it's a very high standard of verification because the risk is very high, and we're involved like Numeracle with BCID as well, and that's a very high standard of risk because consumers are getting something that says this is a trusted communication. And so the concept that's really important to creating shared tokenization of companies for their credentials, if you will, is what's the highest standard of vetting required. 10DLC is not the highest standard of vetting that exists today. As a matter of fact, there's 3 levels within that channel that happen, but you know, the branded messaging, branded calling is. And so conceptually, we've had many conversations, CTIA and others, about the concept of if you are verified at the highest level, why can't we then share tokens for the other channels, right? And that's something we're actually talking about doing for RBM now anyway, so that you have fallback and other things, we can issue the token. The second thing is, though, is that companies do change. Companies get acquired, they get new CEOs, they get new senior management, and so annual re-verification is actually critical for these high-risk channels. So the concept of saying, why do we have to do this again, that's potentially, depending on the channel, that's very important that you actually are re-verifying. And lastly, like I said, there are a lot of discussions going on because from our perspective, if you're vetted at the highest level, we shouldn't be vetting you for all the other channels that you want to go into. And so there are a lot of discussions moving in that direction.
Perfect. So I want to maybe move to Luisa about regulatory landscape across, because you know the different regions, and so as a globe, I mean maybe I think that as a global enterprise navigating this landscape, you know what strategy, how does the enterprise develop a unified communication? What are your recommendations to them? Yeah.
It's extremely complex, but I will say think global and act local. Going on strategic partnerships with aggregators and companies that have the local expertise, because regulations are extremely different among different countries, among different channels, same as the US, which I think is at least is more defined. A brand knows what they have to do. There's other countries where they have no idea, but then you go into the MNOs and not even the MNO has an idea on what are the regulations. So being as close as they can to the end MNOs and as close as we can as an aggregator, for example, to the brand is the best thing that you know we can do. And again, have a plan that is unified globally, but then understanding that there's a fragmented market.
I know we have 2 minutes, so I do have one last question for all of the panelists, which is, you know, I guess I'm trying to see what impact we can have on the enterprise. What is the biggest impact? So if, you know, looking at the ecosystem as a whole, the MNO, the regulator, the technology providers, the CSPs, I mean, I know this is probably not a good question in terms of trying to pinpoint one, but if you were to make a change on anything today, what would be the one change that you think will have the biggest impact in terms of maintaining trust, optimizing communication with their customers? Yeah. Maybe Mary, you can kick it off.
Okay, in a minute and 20, I'll take just a couple seconds. Identity, I think it begins and ends with identity as the core foundation for the enterprise. And I think whatever is the form and format that takes, helping to convey to the enterprise that with your entity verified and vetted and understood, you have the best chance of having your opportunity reach that consumer in the way that you want them to.
Of course, as we mentioned, it has to be hopefully seamless across the different channels.
As little friction as possible.
As friction as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Luisa?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I would say, about something, it's how do we make sure that whatever happens is centralized among all channels, because we cannot keep on making these things more complex every time there's new channels that are going to come on. So how do we make this easy for the brands and for the enterprise?
Martin?
Yeah, I'll save a lot of time by agreeing. I think, really when it comes down to it is we want to get rid of bad actors and we want to protect good actors. And really, if we had a unified way to, like, instead of KYC, KYB, like if we could know each business well across channels, we would know the spammers, even if they applied for a short code after they got blocked on 10DLC.
John?
So we've been around doing compliance work for 19 years, vetting for 16 of those years, but many other services. And what we've learned is it's less than 1% of the bad actors that can bring down an entire channel. Right? There are very few bad actors out there, but when they come in, they do a lot of harm. And so at the end of the day, identity, I agree, is absolutely critical, but vetting and verification up front doesn't stop fraud, right? Because they are going to get in, and so we have to have communications across the partners, the different players in the industry that are trying to stop fraud. There are many great products out there, and we have to have feedback. And the thing that vetting does is it creates a trace back to who's behind it. So if we verify that they are a real company and they are who they say they are, and we know the hops of all the different players that are getting that brand's business to the network, we have trace back. And so it's not just the vetting, it's all of us working together with all the great products we have to stop fraud.
Okay, so I am not going to take any questions because I think we can take questions over cocktails. So I'm going to save that for that. And then thank you, panelists. I appreciate it. Give them a big hand.